This is Marijampole in southwestern Lithuania. Marijampole is located about 54 kilometers southwest of Kaunas. According to the 1923 census, there were 2,545 Jews living in the town. By 1940, it's estimated that the Jewish population had increased to some 2,900 people out of a total population of 15,700. This number included around 200 Jewish refugees from the Suwałki region, which had been annexed by Nazi Germany following its invasion of Poland. According to Lithuanian historians Sigitas Jėgevičius and Arūnas Bubinas, there were 5,240 Jewish people in Marijampolė County as of the 1st of July 1940. Within 14 months, nearly all of these people had been either deported by the Soviets or murdered by the Nazis. In this video, I'll show you what Marijampole looks like today, as well as taking you on a walk of around 2 kilometers from the city center to the location where the Jewish population was murdered. Lithuania became independent in the aftermath of the defeat of Russia in World War I. However, that independence was fragile. Independent Lithuania had a major dispute over territory with Poland. Indeed, the Lithuanians claimed that Poland occupied its capital Vilnius. It also became the third victim of Nazi Germany when the region around Klaipėda, known as Memel in German, was occupied in March 1939 in Hitler's last bloodless victory. As a result of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty, which divided a huge chunk of Europe between the aggressive powers, Lithuania was to have gone to Nazi Germany. However, less than 1 month after this agreement, Stalin asked Hitler if he could have Lithuania instead, and in exchange offered the part of Poland that lies between the Vistula and Bug rivers. Hitler, anxious to please his ally, was only too happy to oblige. Thus the Soviet Union was free to occupy Lithuania, which it did in June 1940. The Soviets introduced their economic and political system very quickly. Businesses were stolen from their owners and nationalized. Private farms were turned into collectives, and mass deportations began. Curiously enough, the number one reason for a Jew to survive in Lithuania was to have been arrested and deported, and then to have survived the Soviet Gulag. Of course, not everyone survived. Those that were older and perhaps weaker often succumbed.
In den frühen Morgenstunden des 22. Juni trat die deutsche Wehrmacht in breiter Front zum Angriff an, die heimtückische Bedrohung des Reiches und Europas durch die bolschewistischen Verräter abzuschlagen.
The Third Reich attacked the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941. Initially, this meant territory only recently occupied by the Soviet Union in Poland and Lithuania. Most of Lithuania was captured within days. After a heavy bombardment which caused several casualties, German armed forces entered Marijampole on day 2 of the invasion, the 23rd of June 1941. Many people had tried to flee, but given the lack of information on the Soviet radio and the speed of the advance, it would seem that few got away. As soon as the Nazis arrived, arrests, beatings and murder of anyone associated with the former communist occupiers began. These people, though, were not just Bolsheviks, Komsomol members and Soviet officials, but also Jews who, according to the conspiracy theory, were responsible for communism. The Jews were therefore not, in theory, being attacked for being Jews, but rather for being communists, which the overwhelming majority were not. Indeed, many of them had had their businesses stolen by the communists. It was only once military rule ended and Nazi civilian rule began in August 1941 that Jews were persecuted for ethnic reasons. As recorded by Lieutenant General von Sperman on the 28th of June 1941, in Marijampole the inhabitants formed a local self-defense and police force. Its measures were directed primarily against the Jews. Many Jews were arrested in these first days, and they were subsequently shot in a forest about 4 kilometers to the west of the town in the direction of Vilkaviskis. Before the 18th of July 1941, 5 mass shootings were recorded in German reports. These killings claimed the lives of at least 174 Jewish men, 14 Jewish women, and 15 communists. On the 11th of July 1941, Nazi authorities in Marijampole ordered the establishment of a Jewish council, headed by Rabbi Abaron Gelleris. The council was to have 6 members. Within days, more anti-Jewish measures were introduced. Jews had to wear 6-pointed Star of David patches on the front and back of their clothing, and they were required to perform various kinds of hard labour, which included clearing up bomb damage for the men and domestic service for the women. Jews were banned from most public places, including parks, restaurants and libraries, and could only visit stores at certain restricted times. In late July, SA Oberfuhrer Arnold Lentzen was named Gebietskommissar for the Kaunas region. We know a lot about the massacres committed in Lithuania because of the Jaeger report, written by Karl Jaeger, commander of the SD Einsatzgruppen 3, which took over the functions of the security police in Lithuania on the 2nd of July 1941. Like in most other countries, the Nazis found willing local helpers. In Lithuania they were called the White Armbands because of what they wore, or partisans, referring to their alleged previous antagonism towards the Soviet occupation. It needs to be pointed out that the word partisan in Lithuanian is used when referring to those who fought the Soviet occupiers and not the Germans, although later in the war there were those who fought both. However, in the summer of 1941, many of them were assisting the Germans, and indeed Kaunas had been captured, aided by an uprising. Sometimes we can see the word partisan used when referring to those that collaborated. However, I shall use the term White Armbands, or TDA, to avoid confusion. The Lithuanian White Armbands were formed into what was called the TDA Battalion, TDA standing for, in Lithuanian, Tautino Darbo Apsaugos, and I'm sorry I don't speak Lithuanian, so I might have pronounced that wrong. That is to say, National Labour Service. The TDA was intended to be the basis for a future independent Lithuanian army, but it was taken over by the Nazis and reorganized into the Lithuanian Auxiliary Police Battalions. The original TDA eventually became the 12th and 13th Police Battalions. These 2 units took an active role in the Holocaust. According to the Jaeger report, the TDA battalion's members murdered about 26,000 Jews between July and December 1941. As Jaeger wrote in his report, the extermination of the Jews could only be achieved by setting up a Rollkommando with a small group of men under the leadership of SS Obersturmführer Joachim Hamann. However, even before the large-scale killing began, Jews were persecuted in other ways. The initial goal was to deprive them of their civil rights and isolate them from the rest of the population, and then to steal their property. After that, they could be murdered. As far as the Jews in Marijampole were concerned, the first act of destruction was when they were forced to burn the Torah scrolls from the synagogue. A few days later, they were ordered to abandon their homes and gather in the synagogue and several adjacent houses. In this improvised ghetto, the Jews were subjected to robbery, forced labour, and the abuse of women at night. Some men who were taken out for forced labour were simply murdered on the outskirts of the town. According to an Einsatzgruppen report, on the 25th of July 1941, 90 Jewish men and 13 Jewish women were shot. On the 4th of August 1941, Kaunas Region Gebetskommissar Arnold Lentzen issued announcement number 3. According to this announcement, Jews who had fled during the fighting were forbidden to return. In view of the speed of the advance, it's unlikely that many had got very far, and in most cases had probably returned by this date. However, it was strictly forbidden to take in Jews who returned. Jews were also prohibited from selling, exchanging, or otherwise disposing of their property in any way. There were severe penalties for not following the provisions of the announcement. Thus, the Nazi occupation authorities were initially concerned with registering and seizing Jewish property. On the 6th of August 1941, Arnold Lentzen sent a letter to all of the township mayors. It included an order to provide a report by the 13th of September 1941 of how many Jews had not paid various taxes, either to the state or the municipality, how much they owed to people who were not Jewish, and to banks, to cooperatives and other businesses, and what Jewish property in the county had not yet been nationalized by the Soviets. This could be in the form of real estate, businesses, non-household assets. Once this information had been provided, Lentzen ordered the mayors to seize the property. At the same time, Jews began to be concentrated in ghettos and internment camps. On the 7th of August 1941, an order was issued to put all the Jews in ghettos by the 15th of August 1941, although by this time the Jews of Marijampolė were already interned in a ghetto. The ghettos were to be guarded by the white armbands. Male Jews aged 12 to 60 living in the ghettos were to be listed according to their trade, and the lists were to be delivered to the township municipalities, police stations, and the Nazi authorities. To maintain order in the ghettos themselves, a police force of 5 to 15 Jews was to be organized and armed with wooden batons. The ghettos also had to elect Jewish committees made of up to 12 persons to handle the internal affairs of the ghetto. Jews in the ghettos had to feed themselves at their own expense. They were not entitled to meat and dairy products, fats or eggs. The rationing of the food of the ghetto was to be delegated to the Jewish councils, which would handle its distribution. The township mayors and police chiefs were put in charge of establishing the ghettos and maintaining order in them. In order to kill their perceived enemies, Nazi Germany created Einsatzgruppen, paramilitary death squads. They had been deployed as from the invasion of Czechoslovakia, but with the invasion of the Soviet Union they became more organized. Their role was to kill. In the spring of 1941 they were collected together on the Düben Heath to the northeast of Leipzig. Here they formed up, they trained, they listened to lectures, and they did team-building exercises. For the attack on the Soviet Union, the Nazis created 4 Einsatzgruppen, A, B, C, and D. The commanders of the Einsatzgruppen were directly appointed by Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich. One Einsatzgruppe was created for Army Group North and Centre, whilst there were 2 following Army Group South. Einsatzgruppe A was assigned to Army Group North, which was tasked with occupying the Baltic states and Leningrad. Einsatzgruppe A consisted of Einsatzkommandos 2 and 3 and Sonderkommandos 1A and 1B. Einsatzgruppe A was initially under the command of SS Brigadeführer Walter Stahlecker. Einsatzkommando 3A, which operated in Lithuania, was under the command of SS Standartenführer Karl Jaeger. This Einsatzkommando had over 120 members who were divided into 3 platoons. Joachim Hamann was the commander of one of the units and was Jaeger's adjutant. Hamann was noted for his anti-Semitism. Jaeger and Hamann probably arrived in Kaunas in the very first days of the German occupation, and the latter was tasked by Stahlecker, the commander of Einsatzgruppen A, to organize a mobile unit for the mass killing of Jews and communists. The German SiPo, Sicherheitspolizei, and SD, Sicherheitsdienst, was not enough to carry out these assignments. Therefore, Einsatzkommando 3A enlisted the help of men in the Lithuanian TDA battalion, the White Armbands, who were being formed in Kaunas. The 3rd company of the TDA battalion was usually the one assigned for the mass killings of Jews. Rollkommando Hamann had no permanent structure or specific deployment location. It was usually called for ad hoc campaigns and consisted of a few German Gestapo officers and several dozen Lithuanian TDA battalion soldiers. Often, Hamann didn't even bother to take part in the killing campaigns in the provinces. He just passed the order on to the TDA battalion, later renamed the 1st Police Battalion. In charge here were Lieutenants Anatolius Daigers, Juozas Baza, and Bronius Norkus. Possibly German Hauptscharführers Reinhold Prost, Josef Stütz, Walter Salzmann, Heinrich Mack, and Walter Pickard, and Walter Planet usually took part in the murder campaigns. Hamann's deputy was SS Hauptsturmführer Helmut Rauca, who 40 years later would become famous when he was tracked down in Canada. The Rollkommando would only arrive at the scene of the murder when all the preparatory work had been completed. The Jews condemned to death were gathered in one place, and the local police and white armbands were there to guard them. A more secluded location for the killings was chosen, usually a forest or remote fields, and pits were prepared in advance. Designated soldiers of the 3rd Company of Volunteers were usually the ones who went to the provinces to kill. Several German Gestapo officers would also come by car to the place prepared for the massacre. The 1st of December 1941 Jaeger report includes a long list of locations where Rollkommando Hamann, together with Lithuanian white armbands, murdered Jews. I think it's quite likely that there are many places in Lithuania where the Jews were murdered by local police and white armbands without the participation of Rollkommando Hamann, although having received orders from this unit. In August, the Germans forced Jewish youths to dig trenches behind the barracks on the floodplain of the Sheshupe River to the south of Marijampole. At the end of August, the Jewish Council was informed by the Lithuanian administration that a large ghetto was going to be established in the cavalry barracks and the surrounding area would be handed over to the Jews. The German authorities also informed the Jews that they would be permitted to organize the social and economic aspects of their lives as they saw fit in the ghetto, as long as the war continued. This information was designed to allay fears and spreading rumours that the Jews would soon be murdered. At the end of August, all the Jews of Marijampole packed up their belongings and moved into the barracks. On arrival, the men were separated from the women and children and were crammed into the horse stables. Over the next few days, the men were subjected to physical abuse. Additional Jews were also brought into the barracks from outlying villages. On the 30th of August 1941, the Jews in Kalvarija, 20 kilometers to the south of Marijampole, probably in excess of 1,000 people, were told that they were to be transferred to the Marijampole ghetto. They packed what they were allowed to pack, and these belongings were loaded into wagons. The possessions only made it as far as the local synagogue. The Jews of Kalvarija were also taken to the cavalry barracks in Marijampole, which became extremely overcrowded, holding some 5,000 people by now. The mass shooting of the Jews concentrated in the Marijampole ghetto was conducted between 1000 hours and 1600 hours on the 1st of September 1941. The men were shot first, followed by the women, children and the elderly and infirm. About 40 German officers and men organised the action at the barracks, while the shooting at the trenches was conducted by 10 to 15 Germans, assisted by 20 to 30 Lithuanian policemen. According to the report of SS Standartenführer Karl Jaeger, in charge of Einsatzkommando 3, 1,763 Jewish men, 1,812 Jewish women, and 1,404 Jewish children were shot, together with 109 mentally ill patients, a German citizen who was married to a Jew, and one Russian. The victims were stripped down to their underwear, forced to lie down in the trench in groups, and then shot with machine guns from the side. Many of them were only wounded and buried alive. 3 men of Einsatzkommando 3 prevented an escape attempt by killing 38 people who attempted to flee down a forest path. Some infants were clubbed or trampled to death. As often happened, many of the killers were drunk during the action. After the war, almost no trace of the former Jewish population remained in the town. We have the monument here, which has been well visited, as you can see by the amount of stones on it. It's written in Yiddish and in Lithuanian. I can't read Lithuanian, but I can read Yiddish a bit, so I'm going to read that to you now, translated. At this place, the blood of around 8,000 Jewish people, men, women and children, together with that of around 1,000 people of other nationalities, was spilt, murdered by the Nazis and their local assistants in September 1941. Let's have a look down here as well. So it's so close to the centre of town. From where I parked my vehicle, which is bang in the centre, just off the main square, it took me, about 15 minutes to walk down here. But one could be completely outside of the town, in the countryside. Thank you very much for listening to this video. I've also published, or will publish, videos on some of the criminals mentioned here, such as Walter Stahlecker, head of Einsatzgruppe A, SS Standartenführer Karl Jaeger, Joachim Hamann of the Rollkommando Hamann and his deputy Helmut Rauca, as well as Kaunas region Geburtskommissar Arnold Lentzen. There are also various videos on the lives of Himmler, Heydrich, as well as others involved in the mass murders of the Holocaust. I upload every day with a shorts video, and there are documentary style videos like this on Tuesdays and Fridays. I always upload at 2000 hours Central European time, as I live in Poland and Germany. Sometimes I do live talks as well. I try to be present when the videos premiere, which gives you a chance to chat in real time with me and other users. These videos feature original research, as I can speak various language, although not Lithuanian, as I think I made quite clear in this video. I also offer channel membership, which costs £5 or €6 or $6, which gives us access to currently over 800 videos, which are for members only. So if you are interested in real researched history without the use of sensationalized language or artificial intelligence, then this is the place to be.